Webinar. Today's webinar is called Back to School Tips and Tricks. My name is Marina and I'll be facilitating our webinar this afternoon. Go over what we'll be talking about today, introduce myself, what I do at YEP, and that sort of thing. Like I said, my name is Marina. I'm YEP's Customer Success Associate, and I've been with YEP for about a year now. Really excited to be getting to work with parents and students and making sure that they're successful with our app. Most of my role includes managing and maintaining our amazing relationships with our families, our parents, and our students. Again, making sure that they're set up for success with our app, and also providing any resources that you all might need in order to best support your children through their academic journeys. Great, so a few housekeeping things. I'll open it up to questions at the end, so we have some time to talk about what's on your mind and what came up for you all. There were a couple of questions that were sent in before we started this webinar through the RSVP survey that I sent out via email, and so I'll answer some of those questions. Today's webinar is really just about back to school, everything that comes with back to school. So that could be common back to school stressors as well as time management tips. We are also currently developing a time management tool that I'll be sending out after this. I will be muting this webinar, be muting all of you. So towards the end, you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question or anything like that. We'll have some time towards the end to do that. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about some common back to school stressors. I know when I was in school, I would get really, really anxious about the start of school and wasn't really sure how to deal with that anxiety, how to talk to my parents about it, how to talk to my friends about it, and how to plan for a really successful and as much as possible stress-free school year. Cool, some common back to school stressors. And some of these also came up through, like I said, the RSVP survey that I sent out to all parents via email. Some stressors came out of there, and some stressors are just sort of common, well-known stressors that every student deals with before the start of school. Here's a full list of all the stressors that could happen. Of course, there are some stressors that might not be on here. Of course, concerns over a mismatch between student and teacher. So it could be that the student has heard about the teacher and is scared to go into a classroom with the teacher. Anxieties around having enough friends. This is particularly true for new students when they go into a new school, not knowing anybody, and really being nervous about whether or not people will like them, whether or not they'll make friends, and that sort of thing. And of course, kids change, and so one year to the next, you could be best friends with somebody, and the very next year, you're not as close of friends, and so that anxiety is definitely there. There could be a concern about bullies, and so, you know, going back to school brings that reality back into the picture for 2 to 3 months. You don't have to see your bullies, and then come fall time, that concern could come back if you know that you'll be in the same class as a bully, or you know that you'll be in the same school as someone who has bullied you in the past. Another one is overscheduling, so being concerned about the amount of activities that you're doing. Oftentimes students will overcommit to certain things, and we talk about this in several ways, right? It could be academic overscheduling as well as after school programs, work, and all of that. I know when I was in high school, I took IB, which is similar to AP. So a lot of my classes were academically rigorous, and so spending a lot of time on homework. I also did drama and I did theater, and so a lot of my time was spent doing that, and I did sports as well, and so much of my schedule was filled up with lots of different activities, and so overscheduling can definitely bring that stress into the picture. Another one is not enough sleep. Sleep is so important. We hear that all the time, and I know even as adults sometimes we have a hard time with this, and getting into a routine, getting enough sleep, going to bed at a decent hour, and we're waking up at a decent hour as well. A couple things that are also interesting in terms of stressors. The first one is work that's too hard. So sometimes students will be anxious about going into the next level grade and worry about whether the work will be much too difficult for what they're used to. Of course, that also comes with the summer months. Oftentimes students are not in summer school. They're not having that everyday school engagement, and so much of what they've learned in the past year, they've forgotten, and so going back into the school environment, it's tough to get all of that back, all of that practice back in and all of that skill. And so they worry about work that's too hard. And that can also come about during transitions between middle to high school to college, elementary school to middle school, just concern about the work being too hard or the load of homework being too much. Another one is work that's too easy. So this is maybe not as common as being concerned about work that's too hard, but certainly work that's too easy. Students can be concerned about getting, if they are already in advanced classes or they're in gifted classes, but they're taking classes that are maybe not as challenging, that can certainly be a stress because it's important that we challenge our students in a way that's healthy for them. I've been mentioning this a lot, but transition between elementary and middle school, middle and high school, and high school to college can be very, very stressful. Not only are you a new student in a new school, but you are also, going up a grade, and oftentimes the workload is much harder. If we think about elementary to middle school transition, oftentimes middle school, you have those different class periods where you're going to history class with one teacher, you're going to science class with another teacher, and oftentimes elementary school, you have one teacher all day. And so the concern there is changing that system and getting used to a brand new kind of schedule, in addition to having to interact with lots of different teachers instead of just one teacher is another anxiety that's really difficult. Of course, the transition from high school to college, oftentimes students move away for college. And college, there's a lot more people that they have to interact with, and so it's certainly overwhelming and stressful for that transition to come about. Like I said before, another stressor, new student at a new school. Lots of us have been there, starting at a new school, not understanding the cultures, especially if you're moving to a new city, not understanding the geography, everyone has their sort of cliques. How do you navigate through that environment, and how are you able to carve out your own space in your school environment? The last one here, another stressor, big stressor, is upcoming exams and tests in the new school year. So this can sometimes happen when there's SATs coming up, placement tests. If you're a senior in high school and you're having to apply to college, all of these stressors sort of come about. But of course, these stressors can happen in any grade if you know that there's going to be tests. Every class tends to have tests, and there's many students who are really stressed, who get really stressed about tests and knowing that they'll have to do tests. So those are some common back to school stressors. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's a list that could be helpful in determining what could be causing your students stress. How do you identify these stressors? Good question. It's hard to know because I don't know all of your students, and every student is different, every child is different. But some of the things, if they're not telling you that they're stressed out, which can happen, many students don't feel comfortable enough to share that they're stressed, and oftentimes don't even know that they're stressed, or don't know that it's attributed to school stress, to back to school stress. Some of these identifiers are difficulty sleeping, headaches, stomach aches, and behavior changes. Now, you know your child the best, and so when things are sort of different, if they're acting differently, if they're acting out, or they're being more quiet, or you're seeing that they're exhibiting more physical ailments, oftentimes that can be a huge marker of stress. And you can, of course, ask them if they're not telling you. If you're thinking that something's up, you can ask them. These are definitely some things to watch out for. How do you approach these stressors with your child? You have to figure out the root of the problem. Ask them questions. It's important to ask them how they're doing, right? So of course, a lot of this is intuitive, but to make sure that we're dealing with back to school stress, it's important to ask things like, are you worried that the work will be more difficult? Are you worried about the teacher? So ask them more guided questions to see if you can get to the root of the problem. Is it the teacher? Is it the work? Is it that you have too much going on? Are you doing enough activities that bring you joy? Oftentimes we schedule way too many things that maybe are too rigorous, and we're not finding time for fun. We're not finding time for downtime or family time, social time, or even the things that bring us joy. Like I said earlier, theater was huge for me and it brought me joy. So I needed to do it to balance out my schedule, not only with academics, but with things that make me really happy. And then the third thing here is offer solutions and allow them to scale back on commitment. performance. Oftentimes students feel like they may be letting their parents down or letting their teachers down if they don't take on as much as they think that they should. And so giving them that space to be able to opt out of anything that either doesn't bring them joy or isn't going to help them achieve the goals that they seek. So the first one here, you can ask them, is there something you can cut out of your schedule? Oftentimes this has to do with aligning their goals. So if their goal that year is to increase their grade in algebra, then perhaps they're spending too much time studying for geography when geography is something that comes easier to them. Another question is, perhaps you don't need to spend 2 hours at the library every Wednesday evening. If this is something that they're maybe putting arbitrary rules on studying, like I have to study this much, we have another webinar, which I can also send out. If you email me, I can send out a recording of it, talking about study skills and how to more effectively and efficiently study so that you're not spending so much time cramming for exams. And then, of course, the last one here has to do with doing activities that bring you joy. If you thought about taking up a sport or an out-of-school activity, so it could be drama, it could be any sort of sport, anything else that they find joy in, even sometimes work. Really engaging them in those conversations and making sure that you're asking them these guided questions so that they're able to be fully successful in what they're doing. How can you prepare your child for back to school? Well, firstly, make sure they have enough sleep. I know that this is hard for a lot of students. I think it's hard to create these routines, but make sure that you're holding them accountable and making sure that they're getting enough sleep. Quickly address issues that lead your student to lack sleep. So things like, are they managing a busy schedule or do they have too much going on? Oftentimes using technology right before bed can prevent enough sleep. I know that the nights where I'm on my phone for an hour or so, or the nights where I'm watching Netflix for too long, I tend to have a harder time falling asleep because the screen keeps me up and that light is not great for putting you in a headspace where you're ready to fall asleep. Third one here is plan out the next week. Oftentimes when I have a lot of things going on in my mind, I tend to get overwhelmed. And so what helps me is to write down everything that's in my mind, everything that I need to do the next week, write it down so that it's easier for me to see, okay, this is manageable after all, and then break it up into smaller steps. The last one here is make time for non-academic activities, so things like downtime or leisure activities, spending time with friends and family, making sure that they have enough time to sit and just be. I think it's hard for us as humans to do one thing after the other after the other. It's important for us to find the time to re-energize and have some time to ourselves. Time management. This is really important, and I wish that I had teachers and role models guide me through what this looked like. We hear this a lot, time management. Are we managing our time wisely? And by the time we get to be adults, it's not a habit that we've formed, and it's not a skill that we've developed through school. And so it's important that we guide our students and our young people to be able to understand what time management looks like so that they're better prepared for adult life and work life and all of that. So just some general tips, and of course I'm recording this, and so I'll send this out if you need it. Get enough sleep. Set study goals for a predetermined amount of time. So if you're planning on studying 2 hours on a Wednesday, make sure it's only 2 hours. Make sure you know what you'll be studying. Again, like I said, I do another webinar about study skills that I can also send out with lots of different specific skills that you can use to get the most out of your studying. Encourage students to use a calendar or a time tracker to plan out their week. Plan weekly goals at the beginning of every week. What are they hoping to accomplish that week? What do they hope to do that week? Do they want to have enough time for friends? Make sure that they have some goals for that week. I would also say plan the next day's to-dos. I sometimes will do this the morning of. So I'll come into work, I'll have a list of 3 things I absolutely need to get done that day. And I make sure to cross them off so I feel a sense of accomplishment. Encourage them to adjust their time if they need to, reward them for meeting their goals, create routines, and encourage them to adjust their schedule if they do not meet their goals. So this is, of course, a process that changes, and so week to week things change and goals change. It's important to be able to adjust and pivot and make sure you reward them for what they're doing. What expectations should I have? I think the big two expectations that you should have is remember that it takes time to form a habit, especially when it has to do with overhauling your schedule. So if you've implemented some sort of time tracker or time management tool, just remember it takes time to form a habit and they're not going to pick it up right away. So if the first 2 weeks it's hard to hold them accountable, that's normal. It's important to continue to motivate them because it's a hard time of year and it's hard to pick up on a new routine. Okay, so how do you make sure your child follows through? There are three things, right? Motivate them, reward them, and hold them accountable. To motivate them, saying something like, I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I believe this will help you ease back into the school year so you're not fumbling to get things done. So making sure that they know you believe in them. Rewarding them, of course, if you're able to stick to your ideal schedule for 3 weeks in a row, that is, we'll go through some of the time trackers that we're currently developing. If they're able to stick to an ideal schedule for 3 weeks in a row, incentivize them with perhaps a movie, or they can take a friend to the movie or something like that. Of course, dependent on what their age is and who they are, what they like to do, have that be more appropriate for them. The last one here is hold them accountable, asking them, were you able to stick to your ideal schedule this week? Is there anything that we need to do differently next week to make sure you meet your goals? And just basically just engaging them in conversation about how it went. Great, sample student schedule. So this is kind of the model that we've adapted or taken from just really blocking out time. It's sort of the simplest thing that students can do so that they can visually represent what's going on during their week. So you see here, this example, the sample student has blocked out basically every day, every hour. You can see here the times on the left-hand side and the days at the top. They've blocked out work, they've blocked out sleep, they've blocked out all of their classes, they've blocked out anytime they have after school activities, you see Chinese class, anytime they have tutoring, homework, fun, anything like that. Ours is a little bit different and very similar, but this one I just wanted to show that it's not necessary to fully block out every minute of every day. Some students work well like that, to have every minute accounted or every hour accounted, while others don't find it helpful. So your student should do the thing that's best for them. You see here that this sample student blocked out, this is a college student time tracker. This student blocked out all of their classes, all the times they have work. They're going to be doing homework every night, Monday through Friday. Of course, that's not necessary to be doing homework every night if it's not something if you don't have homework every night. And so making sure that you're blocking out time for social activities and studying and all of that. Great. Tips for time management. Just make sure you sit down with your child and set both long-term and short-term goals. Long-term, what do you hope to accomplish this school year? Short-term, what do you hope to accomplish in the next month, in the next 2 weeks, the next week? So making sure you're engaging them in those conversations. And when we send out this time management tool, you'll see that we'll have some resources there to help get them to think about some short-term and long-term goals that they have for themselves. Tips for the school year. So did get a couple questions on tips that students can use for the school year. First one is fill out the upcoming time management template that we'll send out. It's called a time tracker. It looks very much like the example that I showed you all. It may be a little different when we actually send it out. That's currently what we're working with. Second one here is set goals that are attainable. And so make sure that you know and that they know that they can get to their goals. So for example, if they have a D in algebra and their goal is to get an A in 3 weeks in the class, that might be hard to get to, but setting smaller goals, like in 3 weeks, we'll get a test that's in the 80s and 90s in terms of grade. And so setting goals that are more attainable. Remember to block off time to recharge. So make sure to put in your time tracker, I'm going to use Friday 7 to 9 p.m. to recharge. I'm just gonna sit there, I'm gonna read, I'm gonna watch Netflix, to really just recharge. Prioritize downtime and fun time, making sure that that's in your schedule and you're not just inundating your schedule with academics and other activities that may not bring you as much joy. And then reward them when they reach their goals. Like I said, you know, take them to the movies, you can borrow the car, whatever it is that works for them. A couple of Q&A questions. Some of these I received in the RSVP survey that I sent out for this webinar. First one here, we homeschool, so we need tips that do take a lot of built-in flexibility and accommodations into account already. How do you recommend we present assignments for 11th grader daily, weekly, monthly, per subject, step-by-step, for graduation, for least amount of stress induction? Great question. This is really hard. I think that, of course, it's hard to know exactly the right answer to give. I don't think that there is a right answer. And of course, I don't know your 11th grader personally. I don't know their personality, what works for them, and that sort of thing. I would try the time checker that we'll send out. They can use it to block off their time. It's really a super simple way to block off your time. You just sort of use a pen or a pencil, create a rectangle, write what it is you're doing during that time. And of course, you can write in little notes like, you know, make sure to do this, make sure to do that, write an address if you're going anywhere. And also just, this is a really big goal setting question. And so this, I would recommend you sit down with your 11th grader, sit down and talk about what goals they want to accomplish for that school year, what goals they want to accomplish for the next month, the next 2 months. And it could be academics related. It could also be, you know, out of school time activity related. So for example, in the next 2 months, I hope to get 2 quizzes with at least an 85% grade. And then presenting assignments to your 11th grader, I would make sure not to inundate them with assignments and make sure to break up the time properly so they have enough time to do their homework and plan accordingly. And so, you know, in terms of homework assignment, it's hard to tell what's going to be the most fruitful, but I would recommend not inundating too much on the daily. Oftentimes, you know, some teachers use packets for the whole week. Sometimes there's long-term projects. I would mix it up between long-term projects and more short-term projects. I'm not a big fan of like worksheets and that sort of thing, but it can be helpful to use them to review certain subjects. But yeah, this is a lot about goal setting. What do they want to accomplish every week? Do they want to study for 3 hours? Do they want to have, you know, 2 hours of homework time a week? And I would definitely say giving them time to have those social times and downtimes and time with their friends and time to do things that bring them joy. So sports, anything like that. So they're not, you know, using up all of their time to do their homework. So it's definitely about setting goals. It's definitely about sitting down, engaging with conversation with them, and trying to figure out what works best for them. How to concentrate better in class, how to be motivated, organization skills, how to socialize with other people. This is a really big question. Concentrate better in class. I would definitely talk with your teacher or your student's teacher to see what they're able to accommodate in the classroom. I tend to have concentration issues as well, and so definitely using other people and asking them, you know, what can I do better in class? Can I sit closer to the class? That often helps, sitting closer to the class, taking notes on anything that's relevant, taking pictures if that's allowed of slides or anything like that, if that's how the teacher runs class. How to be motivated. This one, definitely like giving yourself rewards or setting rewards for goals. So if you complete your homework, you reward yourself with ice cream or something like that, or reward yourself with some time over the weekend to hang out with friends or something like that. So how to stay motivated is rewarding yourself, holding yourself accountable, and reminding yourself that you're doing the best you can. Definitely positive self-talk helps a lot, and having those conversations, surrounding yourself with positive people who give you those validations. Organization skills. This one's tough. Everyone organizes differently. I would say what helped me a lot was having separate places for different classes where I keep all of my materials, color coding my notes. I liked using colorful pens. That really helped. How to socialize with other people. this is a big one. I would definitely recommend just putting a goal out there when you're starting a new school or starting in a new class. Just try to talk to one person. I think a lot of times when we're put in situations where there's a lot of people and there's pressure to socialize, we get overwhelmed. But I think if you're putting a goal to just socialize with one person per class, one person per day, the hardest part is starting a conversation. But to have that goal of just socialize with one person today, see how that goes. Don't put the pressure on yourself to socialize with every single person that you walk by, because I think that can be overwhelming and can be paralyzing. But yeah, I would say concentrate better, sitting up close, asking for follow-up from teachers, asking teachers what they can do to accommodate, asking for, if teachers have extra resources or if they have tools and notes already written out that they can send out to the class. Ask how the teacher runs the class, look at the syllabus. If you're knowing that something's coming up next week, look at that, make sure that you know that that's coming so that you're prepared to receive the information as well. Great. Tips for first year of high school. Good question. I would say try to become involved in clubs or activities as soon as you're able to, so that you can, first of all, meet people, and second of all, make sure that you have that time for socializing, that time for fun, that time to do activities that really bring you joy. Second thing I would say, especially if it's a new school, is visit the school a few days before so you know how to get there, what it looks like, maybe where all your classes are. A lot of schools have these sort of like back to school before school starts registration day where you can go in and kind of see where your classes are. I would definitely recommend that. See where all your classes are. A lot of the overwhelm with starting in a new school is not knowing where anything is. And so making sure that you at least have a map, you have a game plan for the first day. You know who your teachers are, you know what you remember everything is. But also say manage out your time, calendar out your time so you can see it visually. You know what classes you have again. I would also say try not to take on too much right away, just to make sure that you are used to your routine and you can get into the habit before taking on like 6 or 7 activities every week, making sure that you can accommodate and you can manage all the things that you're doing before you start taking on other things. It's definitely hard and it's a process because sometimes students, especially, as you're nearing your upperclassmen years, you want to take on more for college applications and that sort of thing. So it's important to be cognizant and self-aware and make sure that you have enough time to do all the things it is that you want to do, while also leaving room to energize and take care of yourself. Great. So if there are any questions, this is the time to ask them. You can ask for a specific questions on tools that you might use. If it's specific questions to do with maybe your student, you can email me as well at support@yup.com. So I'll leave some time right now if you have any questions that came up throughout. Okay, if there are no other questions, please feel free to email at support@yup.com and we will answer as soon as possible. Again, I'll send out the recording and survey for this webinar, and the tools, time management tools, will hopefully come within the next week or so, but look out for that as well. Have a great back to school. If you need anything at all, if you need support from YUP or have questions about YUP, again, email support@yup.com and we're happy to help. Thanks so much. Take care.